Welcome to the Simplified Dentistry podcast. Join us as we discuss clinical, operational, and financial aspects of your practice, help you enjoy life, and dare to simplify dentistry.
Welcome to the Simplified Dentistry podcast. My name is Richard Offit, and I'm joined by Dr. Mustafa Shakan. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Charles Loretto. Mr. Loretto is a partner at Cain Watters and Associates, and he's the founder of NDP Dental Placement Organization. Welcome, Charles.
We would like to mention our friends at Provide Bank. Provide has a focus on financing for today's dentist. Dentists built a career changing patients' lives. Provide was built to change ours. Powered by Fifth Third Bank, Provide empowers entrepreneurs to build their legacies. Please text SIMPLIFY to 214-620-9577 and see how Jonette Green can become your banking partner.
Hey, it's awesome to be here. I know we had a chance to kind of catch up, and it's been a few years since we've had a chance to see each other. But you're looking great. I'm not gonna lie, and Bruce, pleasure to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you, Charles. Thank you for joining us today.
You know, Charles, I have that face that's perfect for radio. So it's one of those deals where, you know, you're either lying or blind, one of the two. But I appreciate it, as I've listened to a good bit of your podcast, both on your own podcast, Transition Talk, as well as when you've been the guest and lectured at different other meetings. I will tell our listeners that Charles has spoken at 51 of our dental schools and spoken to nearly 30,000 dentists. So when you think about the scale of that and the scope of the people that he's talked to, this is definitely not his first rodeo. So Charles, let's kind of begin for a minute with those kids or young people that you talk to in the dental schools. You go in and you're the speaker, you're the man. So what are you saying?
So many years ago, it's like when you first of all, I'm just passionate about teaching, and I love going to schools. And I first got kind of the nod when one of our speakers, I worked at Cain Watters as an employee for years, and then I quickly figured out, like, hey, you set these speaking engagements up, you go and educate dentists, you create a relationship, and they call you, and then they engage. So I was the guy that was setting up these speaking engagements. I was doing it for our advisors, including the Cain and Cain Watters. And we had a person that was supposed to go to the school, and they got sick. It's like, well, hey, you go do it. So I don't know. I was passionate about teaching on what I thought was important to the student. And so I taught on these other things, wealth accumulation, whatever. And I quickly realized that these students didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to be educated about kind of the critical decisions, like, why should I own? How's it going to work? And so I just kind of started developing a craft for speaking to these students. And like you said, I've actually been now to 60 schools since then. I run a curriculum at Texas Tech University of 80 business hours. I teach the students there. And I've got this one, I would call it speech I'm well known in the industry for, and it's called Why You Must Own. And so either as the national meetings or in dental school curriculums or at just simple old school kind of lunch and learns, I teach a message. And this is basically for the listeners that are not owners, the listeners that are obviously students, residents, or just associates. I've got kind of a longer speech, 45 minutes, an hour. And it really, if you want to sum it up in just 5 things, there's 5 reasons you own a business, 5 reasons that you wouldn't sell, 5 things that corporate America will never tell you. And number 1 reason you become an owner is because you make twice as much money. If you go to work out of chair 1 and 2, students, you definitely need, two chairs to operate out of. You're going to do 50, 60, 70,000 in clinical dentistry a month. You're going to get a $200,000 check. What I'm educating the young group is you have to look at dentistry, from the restorative side. Look at hygiene and go, okay, if I'm doing 700,000 restorative, 60 a month, I'm probably checking around 300 hygiene. So I'm trying to make the example of, well, you're getting paid $200,000, which is 30% of your restorative. You could be making as much as $450 out of the $1 million practice you're essentially running. So I'm teaching the math on the why, which is number 1, you're going to make more money. Number two, you're going to build equity in the business. The $1 million business you just bought is worth something now, has the ability to grow and be more profitable with associates. And that's going to be worth, a bunch of money. So that's equity. Three is tax planning, the ability to run a lot of things through the business. I'm a big proponent being a business owner myself and educated many business owners all over the country. So you get the tax plan, you get to save in your pension plan, which is, roughly $90,000+ a year now, round up to 100,000 with the HSA deduction. And so you got these four reasons. And lastly, you're just in charge. So my message to young people is they just need to understand their why. If they can understand their why, then we can focus on how they become the owner. And so I've got strategies to try to help them on that podcast that you mentioned, Transition Talk. And it's really pushing them of how to create these ownership opportunities and how to simply close to be the owner. And obviously, we'll kind of dive into the rest of this conversation today that we're having on what those next critical paths look like, as an owner. But man, for the young person, if there's two things that I could tell a non business owner dentist is number one, clinical speed, knowledge, education is the first thing I would go tell you to do. Go to Spear, do all the courses, go to COIS, do whatever you got to do. Get your mind, get your confidence in hand that eventually turns into, your voice and, delivery, get your case acceptance up. Let's get the patient in the chair and out of the chair as quick as possible, the best we can. And we're trying to get that average, kind of daily number up. Let's get that up. Then let's get this business, from an ownership standpoint, understand kind of our benefits. And then if we can just do those two things, clinical, understand the why, get into ownership sooner than possible, it makes me so happy. I just, when some young person buys a practice and they tell me they just closed, I couldn't be happier.
Charles, the interesting thing about what you're saying that to me, I've always felt like when you first come out, it is clinical skill that you feel like you don't have, and you just know enough to be dangerous. The problem is you don't know that you only know enough to be dangerous. So acquiring those skills, I think, is important. I think that builds the foundation. You can kind of do whatever you want to from there. Then as you get further along in it, the least challenging thing is the clinical aspect of it. Managing the practice, managing the employees, managing the business aspect is the most challenging aspect from that point on. But, I wanted to kind of come back a little bit to what you were talking about in the first point, where you're talking about just the difference in revenue, difference in income between being an owner and not being an owner. We have a Facebook group, Simplified Dentistry, and there was some discussion recently about EBITDA and different aspects of ownership, and then kind of translating out 5-year models. And the interesting thing that I keep seeing when I look at some of these DSO aspects is they keep talking about, even though you become a percentage employee, you're really not making much less than you used to make as an owner. And that to me is bewildering. I was like, how are they getting this math, or is the math being unchecked on this? What are you seeing from there?
This is coming from the corporate side, basically saying you're making about the same. Well, I totally disagree. I think if you go work as an employee for corporate or for a private practice, that number is the same. You're going to make 30% of 30%. And honestly, when they come out, a young person, I don't care if they go work for corporate. I really just want them to go work at the busiest possible practice to build those clinical skills up. But the math is the math. They're only going to pay them on the restorative. So if you're doing 700 in my example, restorative at corporate or private, you're making about 200. But my point is that you are checking hygiene, you are meeting those hygiene patients, and you would be running $1 million practice, and you should have your overhead in that high 50 range if you're managing all your decisions right. The part that you said that was the challenge part, let's manage team, let's manage the practice as far as our supplies and lab. But there's that margin, and your EBITDA example would be on a $1 million practice for some simplicity. It was doing 700 restorative and 300 hygiene for simplicity. We were paying the doctor $200,000 for that 700. The EBITDA after the doctor conversation would be kind of that 200,000. What these young doctors are basically getting pitched is, come work for me corporate, and I'll let you buy into this stock, and here's the value, and it's going to be worth a lot of money, here in the near future. And I like the concept, but the reality is, if you really want to capitalize with the whole private equity game, just do it yourself. Like, you become the owner. You build out 1, 2, 3 associates. You go build $3 million of top line collections, keeping that overhead really low. And that's going to build your EBITDA. Now we take a big giant number, 400, 500, 600, $700,000 of EBITDA. Let's go command a 8 multiplier or something like that and get a big enterprise value. That makes a lot of sense to me. If I was guiding a young person, if they want to quote unquote work in this space, go do it that way so the capital is on the top level. It makes no sense, in my opinion, to partner with them early on, get that little income and just have to buy the stock with the hopes that that company does well and the hopes it recaps at this. I think they're leaving too much opportunity on the table by going that route. And that's where those Facebook groups don't talk about, is the representation from what's the other side and what are you leaving on the table by doing that. Now it's the equity that they didn't capitalize on. It's the money they were not making. And you cannot, especially owner of a CPA firm, you cannot discount the fact that all your tax planning. I mean, you literally can run hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax deductions through a business when you own it, and they don't talk about that at all.
Charles, let's back up a step kind of in lifetime here. So you have a young dentist. He comes to you and he goes, Charles, he goes, I heard you talked at my school. I loved it. I got to make a decision. Should I start a practice or should I buy a practice? And if you could talk for a few minutes about that, I think that your perspective on that is very, very interesting. And I think our listeners would love to hear it.
So I always start at the end goal, so let's focus on a $500,000 practice, does 500 collections. The problem with that $500,000 GP practice, the overhead's really bad. It typically is about 70%. And the reason is because you're just simply not maximizing fixed costs, meaning the space. You're not maximizing, your people. You're not maximizing a lot of things. You're just not making much money. But when you can take the same 2,000 square foot print and maybe the same 4 employees, they work a little harder and faster. So I don't have to double their labor costs. And those same 4 employees are generating more. And my rent now just went in half because I'm doing twice as much money. The dollar was the same as the percentage. It just went from like 10% to 5%. We become more profitable. And so in the end, I need to try to motivate a young person to understand the economics of dental practice. You kind of need to be doing $1 million. If you can do $1 million out of a practice, you start to get margin. In this case, the profitability. And so in this case, the profitability should be, 40, 42%, some type of high 50% overhead. So let's start with that perspective. Now, you got to understand, how much is that $1 million practice going to cost? It's going to cost you about, if it's for sale, it's going to cost you about $800,000. All right. So do I buy $1 million practice that basically makes $400,000? Do I buy it for 8? Or do I buy a practice over here, do a startup, and it's $600,000? There's 2 things I want us to think about. When you borrow $600,000 for a startup practice, it's going to be immaculate. It's going to be perfect. You have put it in the right spot, and you're set up hopefully for success. The problem I have, you've got 0 new patients. So we got to back into, well, how many new patients do you need in $1 million practice? How many active patients do you need? Well, the active patient number in a 2,000 in a $1 million practice is roughly between 15 and 2,000 active patients. So now it's $1 million question. Literally, is how quick can we get to the $1 million practice? And that depends on marketing. That depends on number of new patients. So if I get if I get 40 new patients a month, that's an amazing number. 40 times 12 is 480. That's, call it 500. You have some attrition. Maybe it goes down to 400 people that don't convert. So about in 4 to 5 years, you should get to that $1 million mark. And that's fine. But time is wasted now, working part-time over here. If I can buy $1 million practice for 800 grand, or start over here for 600,000 with 0 patients, the guy that buys this practice versus the guy or gal that does this, I can take the same $1 million practice, put all my energy in clinical and marketing, now start getting that practice to $1.5 million to $2 million, while this practice has taken 4 to 5 years to get to the $1 million. Now, if you can do a miraculous job of marketing and just put the right spot, it's a high demand area, like the state of Maine, for example. That state is underserved. You went to Maine, you're probably going to be doing 60, 70, 80 new patients a month. That's probably a great place to do a startup. In that example, and again, we're just talking GPs, that practice may be $1 million in 18 months, okay, on a startup. So you have to really look at the person, their experience. You got to look at the demand of that particular area, and do they have the right people involved from kind of the business management side and marketing side to be able to put those number of new patients. Then it's just a matter of, here's both options. Which option is best for you? High probability. It's the easiest way to spend a little bit more money on something that's already working.
Yeah, Charles, I went through the same thing. You know, obviously when I got into dentistry, I was about to sign papers to start up a practice. And it was a nerve-wracking period because you do start looking at it. I mean, the debt's high. You know, you still have to facilitate debt service. You have no patients. You have a beautiful office and you have state-of-the-art equipment, but you got nobody there. And that's daunting. You know, I was able to find a practice that I bought, which I'm still in right now. And for me, I think it was the best decision that you could have ever had, is to walk into something that has patients. And my CPA, who's doing a podcast with us later, basically said, you know, you essentially bought a job. You know, you bought a job and you bought revenue, which is really something that I think is undervalued a little bit when people talk about de novos and startups and things like that.
Yeah, and one more thing we didn't talk about too is on this startup, there's a lease payment.
Yeah.
So it's not just the 600 grand I'm talking about. There's a lease payment that is, going to be another 5, 6, 7 grand. In the practice I bought, when I talked about my overhead at 58%, the lease is included. Okay. Yep. So it is, and I make a case if you're a pediatric dentist. I make a case if you're a surgeon. I make a case if you're an endodontist. And I make a case if you're going back to rural America or a very, very underserved, basically kind of state where you can just like throw a dart and win the game no matter what you hit kind of place. I happen to be know those demographics pretty well. I'm going to Maine next month and spoke to the Maine, a group there, and they're like, if you can ever share to everyone, we need somebody bad. We competition's not a thing here. We need people to take care of our patients. Like, all right, I'll try to spread the word. So, but yeah, you're just trying to look at what these options are. And yeah, I agree with you. I want to buy something that's already running if possible.
Yeah. And talking about the lease payment, the other thing that was scary for me is the lease payment, like 15-year lease, and it's personally guaranteed, and you're like, so you can't get out of that thing. No. There's no way to break it, which was really scary for me.
Let's kind of think about this. So they run across Charles Loretto and they hear him talk and they come away and they go, okay, I'm gonna buy this practice. And then they go, I don't know anything about buying a practice. So Charles, one of the things that impressed me most about Cain Watters is that you have, you kind of do some preliminary work. In other words, the person doesn't know they want to become, or that they need, or they want to be, they want a client to be. They don't even know if they need to be a client. This is a young person out of residency, out of school. They're saying, oh my gosh, it is daunting, as Dr. Shakan was saying. And so one thing I'd like you to talk about for just a minute, and I think this is so valuable, is the type of calls that you take from these people. So you've lectured to them. They heard you at the Hinman meeting in Atlanta, and they go, I think I want to call these people and talk a little bit about coaching calls versus analysis calls. And I think that's such a unique thing that we need to address just for a minute before we kind of go into mid-career type decisions.
Sure.
I would like that.
So we got a big team here. But yeah, we believe that you should educate the patient before they hire you. No different than a free exam that you would do, with a patient. So people come to us from all walks of life, all different positions. They could be an employee. I can help those people with personal financial planning. So maybe I just talk about that. Maybe it's something they want. Independent contractors is an area we can help with where they're 1 or 2 years, maybe just going to be an independent contractor. They're working, they're waiting maybe for a spouse or something. But being an independent contractor can be daunting to plan with because they don't have a good vision and view of how to plan now for FICA tax, state tax, federal tax, what they should be running through as an independent contractor. So we can kind of look at their situation, see what they're doing, and then advise them maybe differently. And those are areas that we can help with. But many times these young people are coming to me with what your example was. What do you think I should do? Okay. And so we're looking at it from a quick business analysis where I take a look at tax returns, profit and loss statements, maybe evaluation. And for me, I think it's simple. I mean, I've done this for 20 years, so I can look at something in a matter of minutes and quickly see this is good or bad, the vision of it, what the opportunity is, and then I'm ready for questions for our buyer. And so it's a great service because it's a no cost and obligation just to look at something. And I tell people all the time, like, I'm going to look at something for 1 or 2 times for free. But if you bring me the third bad deal in a row, we're going to have a talk, because I'm literally on the call with them and I do, a Teams meeting or Zoom share screen. I'm like, here's how to figure this out on your own. So the third time you come back to me, you're kind of bringing me something I'm going to bless. Then after that, obviously, all the due diligence that we would do of combing through tax returns and trial balance sheet, looking at every single transaction that happened in the last couple of years, come up with our own valuation to help guide the person through the process. So that's through our transition department, NDP, where that podcast rests. So
do you ever get the call? You ever get the call from somebody who's really straight out of school and has heard you and is like, look, I know at some point I want to do this, but how do I get myself ready to do it? What are all the things that I need to do? Help guide me to build the thing so when the deal does come, I'm ready to do it.
So that's literally where 250,000 podcasts or 250,000 plays on those podcasts live, because this is my motivational tool and educational tool to walk them through the process. So the biggest thing, I would say the letdown or my most frustrated moment when talking to students and residents and associates is their lack of just sheer passion, desire. I will do whatever it freaking takes to find an opportunity. They're kind of like, oh, let me Google here, dental practice for sale. I'll email this broker and no one's replying back to me. Like, that's just not enough. So the intent is,
sounds like my kids.
Yes. I literally had this conversation yesterday about my kids going into summer. It's like, you will give me daily updates in March of what you're going to do this summer, because you're going to work this summer, period, in the story. Same concept. So I need you to market yourself to all these practices. I'm teaching them how to do it, teaching them how to have really good leading conversations with those established doctors so that they can vet the good ones and the bad ones that have good opportunities for either ownership or into a partnership. So the short answer is, again, no commercial there, but the NDP podcast is really where, say it this way, I didn't create that podcast other than anything in one reason. I'm tired of telling them what to do. I'm going to record myself and you go listen to it and figure this out yourself. Basically come back with me with some type of good opportunity so I could help you into ownership, because it was a conversation I was literally having once a day. And I'm like, can't do it.
Can't do
Can't do
it.
it.
Can't take it anymore.
No, I
It's
didn't, I
like
didn't even,
it's like
I don't even know
like
what a
the
podcast was 7 years ago or 6 years, whenever we started. I was just like, I just want to record myself.
it's
Like,
like the
Charles,
kids in the back seat. When are we getting there? Right? When are we
when
getting
do
there?
we get? Yeah.
Yeah.
When am I stop talking? That's what I want to do. When can I stop talking?
The one of the things that I think I picked this from Transition Talk, and I hate to beat on that drum, but I was in practice for 40 years, and I enjoy listening to Transition Talk. You don't have to be young, getting out of the box to right out of school to listen to it. There's so much value and in that podcast, and that's the last I'll say about
Okay, no.
puffing up your podcast. But it's really quite good for everyone to listen to, regardless of where you are in your career. One of the things, Charles, that I found most interesting, and I think I borrowed this from you, is you can tell a lot about the person you're working with based on the types of questions they ask you, right? And so what questions should the doctor that he's in a practice, he owns the practice, he's not in mid career, but he's definitely closing out the first third. Okay.
Okay.
What kind of questions should he be asking, and what kind of strategy should he be taking to be able to accomplish the goal? And because at some point in time we all stop doing what we do for work, right? And so if you'll handle that, take that topic.
Yeah. So what I tell people is like, in the end, we're all in the same boat. We're all doing the same thing. We are working, and one day we're not going to work, and one day, hopefully, we've done a good job. We've got assets that are sending us a check. So in the end, this is a wealth accumulation game that we're all doing. You happen to be a dentist, and I happen to be a company that helps dentists accumulate their wealth. And so call it the 40-year-old, okay? The 40-year-old hard conversation they need to have with themselves is, I've been doing this for 12 years. I was an associate for this. I'm an owner for this. Where am I? Am I, do I need 6 million, 7 million, 8 million to prepare for retirement? Based on my budget, based on my goals, based on the 1 or 2 house, based on public and private school, what amount of money do I need? Where am I on this accumulation journey? Second is, if I'm ahead or behind, in this case, most people are behind, what can I do? What do I need? What's my critical path now to get there? And it's going to be the obvious. It's save more / cut spending, something like that. Nobody wants to do. So, the idea is that let's start with your business. Let's clean up the financial statements so you can truly understand what your overhead is. So the critical path for that person, and kind of a reflection moment, is, where are my assets? Where do my assets need to be? I'm typically, in that example, behind. What do I need to do now with my example, $1 million practice with a 62% overhead? What is my critical path over the next 15, 20 years? Okay. And the first thing I would say, the critical path is, know where you are. Next is, know where you are in your practice. So if I've got that 62%, or is that good or bad? In this case, I believe they can be improved. So good financial statements will have good metrics, good KPIs, team costs, assistant, front desk, and hygiene. I definitely want those separated. I want to see percentages of my total revenue. Typically, I'm shooting for a 25% number on team costs, somewhere around a 11, 12% when I add in both my supplies and my lab costs together. Separate line items. And then I don't want to overbuild on my real estate. I don't want some 5,000 square foot facility with 2 tenants that are vacant. I need to make sure I'm managing my fixed costs with my decisions, managing my team costs, looking at all of my direct cost expenses, something simple as, the softwares I'm using, the credit card merchant services that I'm paying, to all my vendors, so that I can get my overhead down. Now, with this either increased money that I'm finding, I can set some goals to grow it to 1-1-1-2. How am I going to do that? Now increase my margins. Take a look at this additional cash I'm going to have. How, with this additional cash, can I play the catch-up game for retirement? So maybe the example was say, they're saving 35 to 40,000 a year. They should be saving 80. Where's the money going to come from? So you got to back into where am I going and how am I going to get there in this practice? Then now, if I'm clear in the practice that I need to go from a $5,000 day to a $6,000 day, and that difference is going to yield, $100,000+ in net cash flow to me. What do I need to do with that money? How do I save it tax deferred? How do I get all these tax deductions so that I can basically execute? And it's like being in a tunnel, no light, frustrated, extremely tired, extremely nervous, and at least seeing a light and being able to say, okay, I got it. Right, we're ready, and we can hard charge a little bit more and a little bit more because we have a vision now. I can't tell you the number of people that I've spoken to in that space, and they're a little bit lost. Okay. I'm trying to educate and motivate them by looking at their tax returns, see what they're doing, profit loss, see where overheads are at, to give them a little all right, buddy, good job. Here's the critical path. And that's what I love doing on these coaching calls with them. Push them a little bit, let them see their own, faults, but also try to motivate them to, you got to remove emotion from a lot of these people that you're working. I mean, speaking to your audience now, you got to remove emotion and basically kind of go in for a checkup every now and then and go, am I doing all this right? Because if I'm doing something wrong, I kind of want some help here.
So now when you're looking at something you said that's interesting to me, you're looking at the metrics, 25% of being staffing cost. We all know staffing cost has gone through the roof. So are you still seeing that staying at that 25%, or now you're seeing that the metric on that has moved to 32%, something like that?
No.
Or are you saying that the production is having to increase to overcome that?
Look, if I see a practice that's got a 32% team cost, there's two things I can almost tell you for certainty. Number one, it's a 90% PPO practice. Number two, the hygiene is the problem. It's the hygienists that have the highest commanding salaries of $50, $60, $70 an hour. And if in the end, that department has to be profitable. And so what we're trying to do there is to figure out what is the problem. You got this PPO practice is 90%. We're overpaying in hygiene. Hygiene has no incentive, and we're getting all of these write-offs. It's going to be hard. They're going to have to change that model. They're going to have to change the strategy on the marketing, getting to the right new patients to be able to convert those patients and get off some of the insurance plans so that I can grow from, production of, 1.3 million, but they wrote off 300,000. This is the problem. Or I could need to bring a hygiene consultant in to fix the hygienist to get them more, I would say in tune to getting patients, in and out the door and doing the, respective, diagnosis that they should be doing and presenting when they have perio problems.
Do you see the fee for service kind of practices? Do you see them where they are having to pay for more for hygiene? They're just kind of recouping it by raising fees, or is that
exactly? Yeah. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. We cannot just let employee costs drive, and just hit our bottom line. We have to adjust our fees to be to where our model is still profitable.
So, Charles,
one more comment.
Okay.
One more comment there. We do accounting at Cain Watters for over 1,000 dental practices. So this is not just some pie in the sky. Guy has lost his no idea what he's talking about. I'm doing accounting for 1,000 dentists, and this is where we're at. This is our 25% number that I'm talking about. They're able to achieve even through these last couple of years that have been so painful as all of our employees' costs have gone through the roof.
So Charles, let's assume that our mid-career doc, he's gotten the right coaching, and everybody needs coaching, And if I want to get my sorry golf game better, I'm going to need some coaching, right? So we
That can't
ever,
get better.
It may not be able to.
I've seen it.
It may be
Prayer
so
or
hopeless.
alcohol. That's the only thing I've worked with.
Yeah,
Prayer and
all the
alcohol.
coaching you want.
That's right. Beer golf may be the answer, but so we've have our doctor. He's working hard. He's gotten coaching, and he's more or less moved through this wealth accumulation period. And he calls you up and he goes, Charles, I don't know. I just don't know how much longer I can do this. What do you think I should do? How should I approach this? I still love being a dentist. I love the patients. I love all these things, but I'm just realizing I can't do this forever. Right. How do you handle that when you get that call? That's got to be one of your good calls, right? On the top 10 of your good calls. So how do you handle that?
Is that somebody who has already accumulated the wealth?
Yes.
Or
yes.
So
yes.
they're in place.
They've had the coaching. They've got everything in place. They've worked their 12, 15, 20 years, whatever the model takes, right? And then they call
Sure.
up Charles and they go, okay, my kids are grown. My wife thinks I'm working too hard. I probably am. I've gained 20 pounds. I don't exercise enough. Charles, I can't do this forever. Help me. I still love being a dentist. Help me with this.
They're in the financial independence period. Now it's just kind of, what do I do?
That's right.
How do I get out, or what is the end game?
Yeah. How do you structure that? How do you coach that?
So let's talk about, because I'm a numbers guy. So here, let's just say the age is 60. Let's say it's a $1.3 million GP practice. He or she, in this case, he is gotten just to where it's just kind of a bread and butter practice now, kind of referring the stuff out. 30 new patients, so it's solid GP practice, really is. I'm asking questions like, hey, where are you financially? I'm doing really well. I've got, I don't know, 6 million liquid. Perfect. What about debts? No debts. What are your, he's asked, what's their house, right? They tell me some $2.5 million house. I can already know what their lifestyle is. They tell me a $1 million house or less, and no lake house, no this, no Cabo house. Kids are out, they're 60, that much money. More than likely, they've got a decent, conservative lifestyle. I think that the $6 million is going to be adequate, basically yielding them some type of, $300,000+, yearly income for the rest of their life. I feel really good about that. So now it's really backing into that doctor and asking him the question is, sounds like you're in really good financial state. Let's just talk about your practice. Let's back into how you envision transitioning out. I would think that based on the collections of 1-3, it's definitely can support a second doctor. Space is now my question. Did a 4-chair practice? It's 4 chairs. It's going to be kind of a shorter transition because we've got a space issue. Give me 6 chairs only utilizing 4. I think we can actually bring the associate in, pull back from 4 days to 3 days, put a lot of dentistry in on the associate, a lot of new patients, give them some clinical goals on things maybe referring out. Let's get their speed up, invest in that with them, develop a 2-year plan, do one of 2 things. A, sell them 100% of the practice, or B, we can create a partnership together and maybe do that for a set number of years, maybe associate 1 to 2, create a partnership, and maybe retire out at 65. The point of that is, I always like to say is, tell me a time frame that you feel comfortable with. And so what I usually look for is if somebody says, Charles, freaking you give me a reasonable price for the practice. Here's the coat. Here's the keys.
Out of here.
Let me tell you something about, operatory 3. You got to put a little duct tape on it every once in a while. You got to hit the pedal a couple of times. This breaker here, you got to flip it over here a couple of times. She's really moody, on Mondays. She's got to leave early on Thursdays because of this. But I'm done. Okay. It's rare that situation. They're usually wanting to stay around. They want to transition kind of their patients, their legacy patients to somebody. They want to mentor a little bit. So I really want to figure out where they are in this mental game, financial game, and I'm either going to coach them. Here's the estimated value of that business. I don't know, probably $1 million for that 1.3 million, 60% overhead practice. It's probably reasonable and fair, 1 million. We may want to think about if we associate, allow them to kind of stay. Maybe the young doctors, a D4 coming out, probably can't take over the 1.3 million practice, not going to get a loan. So I need to develop some type of strategy, either a partnership, kind of a staggered sell, or a walkaway practice if they get some GPR, 4-year experience buyer. It's 4 shares. All they want to do is buy 100%. Let's just value it and sell it. Then, yeah, we're going to go down that road with them. So we're going to customize, listen to the doctor and kind of figure out a plan for them based on the back end goal of timing of when they want to exit out.
What would your take-home message be to our listeners that have spent the last 45, 50 minutes with us? What would be your take-home message? And I guess that would encompass the financial decisions the dentist must get right.
Okay. So yeah, let's just kind of put those two together and from a summary standpoint. So, look, get into ownership sooner than later. Absolutely critical. Really good key financial statements. You need monthly financial statements. I think accountability is super important. We set goals. We need to go back and revisit those. Wealth accumulation. You don't wake up with $6, $8, $10 million. You just don't. I mean, you might get lucky to inherit it. You might get lucky to win it, but these are half percent chances. People that have wealth, they created, business goals. They created savings goals. They have a tax planning strategy. There's accountability along this journey. You're constantly revisiting and looking. You've got to understand the complexity of tax law. It always is changing. If you're listening to this and your accountant is not proactive, let me give you a definition of proactive. Proactive is the person I just spoke with. They have completely tapped out at $150 a month. They're doing $150 a month on average for the first 8 months of their financial statements this year. And he literally said, I can't do any more than 1.8. It's 150. I would take that same doctor. I'd look into 25, amazing overhead. He's netting 700,000, so about 52, 53% over, something like that. I can look at that and say, okay, John, you're going to make 700,000 next year. We're going to save, because of his age, $150,000 in a 401k profit sharing cash balance plan. Plus his wife is saving, so another 20. So they're going to be saving at least, she makes about 100. They're going to be saving about 170 a year. So I take 800 grand between the two of them they make. I deduct 170. I start deducting another 100,000+ of just normal deductions from cars and meals and travel. We've got 3 kids in this case that we're paying, $15,000 a year for. So we're getting that tax liability from like an 8 number down into the, I don't know, for simplicity, 5.25 number. I can literally look into next year. The tax brackets are already out. You can see how much the 25 taxes are. You can see it. So let's go ahead and go into software and budget it. And now I've taken all my deductions. I'm telling you what to do. I can literally tell that individual, hey, you're going to have to pay $150,000 of federal and state taxes. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take this out of your salary. This is how much coming out of your spouse's salary. Here's the quarterly estimates we're going to have. This is all based on you doing 150 a month, 1.8, based on all of these things. I'm going to monitor that throughout the year, and I'm going to adjust your tax planning along the way. There's accountability to all of that. You need to go hit your 150 number. You need to manage this. I'll manage these other things. Let's check in to make sure who's doing, where are we at in this project. And that is allowing us and the doctor to stay on track. It's allowing their financial plan to stay on track. Did the market go up 15, 18%? We're ahead of the game. We've only budgeted for 8. The market go down 20? Okay, let's don't freak out. It's a moment in time. Let's just see where the year shakes out. We'll revisit next year. If we need to save more because we're only 4 years away from retirement, we're going to do that. Okay, so it's just developing this plan, both of the business, both tax-wise, and financial planning wise, having accountability throughout that journey. And for you as the business owner, you're the CEO. What's going to get in your way from this is a lot of time the emotion. I want this. I want to buy this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to work. I don't want to, something. I want to something. And I really like my guy, he or she. It's those emotions that really, really, in my opinion, have been the biggest. It's the hardest thing for people to do is make change because of a lot of times these relationships people have. And if once you get out of those relationships and get on the right course, you can improve your chance of really getting to where you want to go. Again, it's assumption that some of those people are directing the wrong way. If I see somebody's going down the right path, like the 60-year-old that's got $6 million, and I don't need to bring them into Cain Watters. I might just bring them in to transition them and help them with valuation and transition services. And they don't maybe have to go down the Cain Watters route because, quote unquote, they don't need it, don't perceive they need it. Absolutely. The critical path is maybe just the transition strategy.
Charles, I'm telling you, I've always enjoyed working with Cain Watters. I felt that the information that you all bring to the table was helpful for me. I have many friends that are in your 1,000 dentists, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the information. I appreciate how hard you work, and I just, for all our listeners, all of us would thank you, Charles, for coming and being part of Simplify, and Dr. Shakan and myself. We thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.
It's been fun, man. I hope that you can see the energy and passion I have. I definitely want to educate and motivate people for that change for the better, and certainly want to promote private practice dentistry and help people with any of their life or transition financial planning goals. So no, I appreciate the invitation to be here, and happy to help any of your listeners with anything that we can.
Charles, we will put your information, make it available on our social networks. So I appreciate you.
Sure.
I appreciate you very much.
Oh man, thanks guys. I appreciate you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles.